Good evening, everybody. Council just met in closed session. I will now ask the clerk to provide the closed session report.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Council met pursuant to Section 239(2) sub F of the Municipal Act to consider advice subject to solicitor-client privilege regarding the short-term rental bylaw. The Township Solicitor was in attendance both in closed session as well as in the meeting now, and Council received information and advice in response to questions regarding elements of the draft short-term rental bylaw.
At this time, I'll ask everyone to please stand for the national anthem. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather as the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee peoples, acknowledging the One Bowl and Spoon Treaty. Disclosures of interest and general nature thereof. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Okay, please note that these proceedings are being broadcast live, recorded, and made available through the Township website and YouTube. Our volunteer firefighters are having a drive-through fish fry this Friday, April 7th, starting at 5 p.m. at the Community Hall. Our drainage program open house will be held on Thursday, April 13th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Community Hall. The public information session for the Consolidated South Wainfleet Drain Project is Thursday, April 20th at 6 p.m. also at the Community Hall. The Niagara Transit Commission meets Tuesday, April 18th at 3 p.m. and the next NPCA board meeting is Friday, April 21st at 9 a.m. Our next general meeting of council will be held Tuesday, April 25th at 7 p.m. Are there any announcements or remarks from member of council? Seeing none. Moving on to the adoption of previous council minutes, are there any comments, corrections for the draft minutes from March 21st, 2023? All right, I have a motion that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held March 21st, 2023 be adopted as circulated. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor McCullen, Councilor Gilmore, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Public meeting, there is no public meetings listed on the agenda this evening. Moving on to delegations, we have two delegations on the agenda this evening. The first one being Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. We would like Kaylee Pyatt here to, we have Kaylee Pyatt here to make a delegation respecting the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. Ms. Pyatt, can you please come up to the podium, and you will have 10 minutes to make your presentation to council.
Sorry, just waiting for the presentation there. There we go. All right, so good evening. As you said, my name is Kaylee Pyatt, and I'm an account manager with Municipal and Stakeholder Relations, taking care of Niagara Region. I look forward to working with all of you throughout the 2023 year and beyond. So whether you're newly elected or a seasoned official, please know that we're here to help. We have an entire Municipal and Stakeholder Relations team at the ready to answer any questions that you may have. At MPAC, we are Ontario's property assessment experts. Our job is to assess and classify more than 5.5 million properties across the province with a combined value of $3 trillion. In the past year, Ontario has grown by approximately 45,000 new residential homes, and in 2022, we added more than $37 billion to Ontario's assessment rolls. Every municipality uses our assessments to make informed decisions about their community, including the distribution of property tax. So we have 4 key players in Ontario's property assessment and taxation system, and they all have a different role in this process. There's the provincial government, specifically the Minister of Finance, who is responsible for setting assessment, taxation, legislation, and policies. They also determine the education tax rate. There's also an independent body known as the Assessment Review Board, who is also overseen by the province. MPAC is an independent, not-for-profit corporation funded by all Ontario municipalities. Our role is to accurately assess and classify all properties in Ontario, and we do this in compliance with the Assessment Act and regulations which are set by the Government of Ontario. We are accountable to the province, municipalities, and property taxpayers of Ontario through a board of directors who is comprised of municipal, provincial, and residential representatives, all of whom are appointed by the Minister of Finance. Then we have municipalities who will determine the requirements, set their tax rates, and collect property taxes to pay for services such as police, fire, recreation, and water, among other things. And finally, we come to the property owners who pay the property tax bill and help set market value through ongoing purchases and sales. As you can imagine, maintaining Ontario's property database is very important. Property data is continuously updated so that our records are accurate when our stakeholders are making important decisions about taxes. Maintaining Ontario's property database includes inspecting new construction and assessing renovations and additions promptly, responding to property owner inquiries and helping them to understand their assessments. We support municipalities by offering Municipal Connect, which is where our municipal stakeholders can obtain the primary source of assessment-related data. And we work collaboratively on projects that are important to you, like digital e-permitting. We also have statutory duties, such as responding to requests for reconsiderations and maintaining the people data by tracking over 5.5 million properties for school support. Monitoring the market and assessing newly built and renovated properties are just some of the things that we do every day to keep our property data current. We will also periodically update every property in the province as of a particular point in time, and we call this a reassessment. The valuation date for the most recent assessment update took effect in 2017, and the valuation date was January 1st of 2016. Now, this is when we determined what every property in Ontario could have reasonably sold for, given its current state and condition as of a particular point in time. Provincial legislation will determine when MPAC conducts each province-wide assessment update, and they will set the valuation date for each assessment cycle. Now, the reassessment was scheduled to occur in 2020, but this was postponed by the province to provide stability and certainty to Ontarians and to enable municipalities to focus on responding to the challenges which were posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, property assessments continue to be based on the legislated valuation date of January 1, 2016. Although the assessment update remains paused, our work continues to keep property data up to date. Property owners will still receive a notice from MPAC for any changes that take place on their property. This past November, we mailed out almost 800,000 property notices to reflect these changes. Now, once the province announces when the next assessment update will be and what the legislated valuation date will be for that cycle, we're going to work with you to have meaningful conversations as we finalize the values in your communities. So let's talk briefly about valuation in Ontario. There are 3 industry-wide standardized approaches to value. So we're looking at the cost approach, the income approach, and the direct comparison approach. Today I'm going to focus on the direct comparison approach as it's mainly used for residential properties, condos, and vacant land. Now, should you wish to learn more about one of the other approaches to value or have a more in-depth conversation about assessment, I'm happy to attend a training session, but I'm also available to you should you have questions individually. With the direct comparison approach, we analyze recent sales of comparable properties that sold for a similar or identical use as the property which we're looking to value. This will provide us an indication of value. It's also important to note that only valid open market transactions are to be used in the analysis. Now, when we're looking at the valuation of a residential home, although our analysis tool is going to look at over 200 factors, the above 5 are actually going to make up approximately 85% of a typical residential home. So we have location, lot dimensions, exterior square footage, quality of construction, and age of the property, which will be adjusted for any major renovations or additions that have taken place. Now, you may ask what draws our attention to a property, and it's typically one of the following things. So we're looking at a market sale, a request from a municipality or a property owner, building permit activity, or the filing of an RFR or appeal. MPAC's role is to take building permits and plans and turn them into assessment. Our municipal stakeholders rely on MPAC assessments to levy property tax. The sooner MPAC can deliver assessment, the sooner our municipal stakeholders can realize new revenue. Every year, MPAC processes around 300,000 building permits for new development or renovation. Now, sometimes property owners may not agree with our assessed value, and a property owner might connect with you to let you know that they do not agree with the assessment. But it's important to remember that assessments are not taxation. Property owners should ask themselves, could I have sold my house for its current assessed value on January 1st, 2016? They should visit aboutmyproperty.ca and ensure that the information that MPAC has on file for their property is accurate. While on About My Property, owners can conduct comparable research on assessment values in their areas. If a property owner still disagrees with their assessment, they have an option to file a request for reconsideration, and we will review their property free of charge. There's also the ability to file an appeal with the Assessment Review Board. So let's spend a quick moment to address the relationship between property taxes and assessment. Assessments distribute taxes, they do not determine the taxes to be paid. When a province-wide assessment update occurs, the most important factor is not how much the assessed value of a property has changed, but rather how the assessed value has changed relative to the average change in that class within their community. In anticipation of the next province-wide assessment, we've implemented a strategy to address misconceptions about the relationships between assessed value and taxation. This includes resources for municipalities that will ensure when an announcement is made that we're ready with the support you need. This digital toolkit is available on mpac.ca and can help municipalities, including elected officials, mitigate misinformation and provide support and resources to educate and inform property owners. In the digital toolkit, you're going to find a new video, how your property taxes are calculated based on the assessed value of your home. I've linked this video in the presentation on the next page so that you can easily find it. We won't have time this evening to watch it here, but I do definitely recommend that you take the time to review it if you haven't done so already. I'm just going to skip over that. And so with that, I want to thank you again for having me out this evening, and we definitely want to stay connected. So if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our In Touch, which is our monthly municipal e-newsletter, and you can do it through mpac.ca. You can send me an email, and I'm happy to sign you out, but please be sure to reach out anytime should you have questions or require further resources.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any comments or questions for our delegation from members of council? Oh, Councilor McClellan, go ahead.
You, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. That was a good presentation. I hope I learned a bit here, but I have a question for you. So on your evaluation, we have another issue coming up tonight that's a hot topic around the world. It's not just in Wainfleet or Ontario. Short-term rentals. Somebody's taken a residential piece of property and turned it into a commercial piece of property. Do you now assess them on a commercial value or just what the home could sell for? Because they are commercial. They're competing with the hotel down the street. How do you do that? And it's probably 9 pay grades above you, so I'm not going to expect an answer, but maybe you can get back to me on that if you would.
Certainly. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I can provide you a little bit of insight. When it comes to the assessment of any property, MPAC is going to follow the legislation, and that's going to outline how we assess each property. So when it comes to short-term rentals, their use is still residential. It doesn't meet the definition via the regulation through the Assessment Act for us to put it on as commercial. So I understand that they're being viewed in municipalities as a commercial entity, but legislatively, they're still viewed in their use as residential. So if a unit were to be 7 or more units, it would then fall into a multi-residential tax class, but before that, it is still viewed residentially.
Any other discussion from members of council? Seeing none? Okay, then I have a, thank you, Kaylee. You're okay. I have a motion that the presentation from Kaylee Pyatt respecting MPAC 101 be received for information. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor McClellan? Counselor Anderson. Any other further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, moving on to our second delegation of the evening. We have Rico Leon here to make a delegation respecting the short-term rental bylaw. Mr. Leon, please come up to the podium, and you will have 10 minutes to make your presentation to council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. Mr. Mayor, councilors, town staff, fellow Fleeters. My name is Rico Leon, and along with my wife, Florence, live on Lakeshore Road here in Wainfleet. We built our home over 30 years ago. All the properties around us were zoned residential, and the homes we inhabited were inhabited by the owners and their families. We developed a friendly relationship with our neighbors. We knew them, they knew us, and we looked out for one another. These are the same people who support and send their children to local schools and support the local hardware store, the hairdressers, the bakeries, the restaurants, and so on. You know the people I'm talking about Fleeters. Then we wake up one morning, about 5 years ago, and we find ourselves living next door to a hotel. Make that 3 hotels, and soon to be a 4th. Today, of 13 homes within 200 meters of our home, 5 are now operated as STRs by absentee landlords. This change occurred in the last 5 years. I would venture to say that as soon as one of these owner-occupied homes comes up for sale, it would likely be turned into a short-term rental by a new absentee owner. This phenomena has occurred repeatedly, many times over throughout the township and surrounding communities. It has significantly changed the definition of our residential areas to the degree that it is changing our community. What will Wainfleet look like in 10, 15, 20 years from today? Will Wainfleet have a school, a community center, a Lions Club, a farmer's market? Can you see the deterioration of our community fabric? Imagine living next door to a house where you have 10, 12, 15, or any number of new neighbors every 2 or 3 days. The renters move in around 3 p.m., play and party on the beach that evening, and into the early morning, resume the partying the following day, into the evening and early morning, and by noon the following day, they're gone. Cleaning crew comes in, cleans up the place, and it starts all over again at 3 o'clock. That is what we and many other residents of the Lakeshore experience from Victoria Day to Thanksgiving Day. It's been stated that STRs bring tourist dollars into the community that support local businesses. I can tell you firsthand that that's not the case. Absolutely not. I watched the renters come in around 3 o'clock, unload their coolers full of food, their beer cases, their beach umbrellas, their canopies, their boom box, chairs, and they get set up to party. They're here to party, to drink, play loud music. At times, the ground shakes for the loudness of the music. And they continue to party for a couple of days. They don't have time to shop or sightsee. They're only here for a couple of days. There have been occasions where we had to take our visiting grandchildren into the house to shelter them from the F-bombs that were being hurled and the obnoxious behavior that is being displayed. Riding their Sea-Doos close to shore, splashing the swimmers. They do not contribute anything of positive value to the community. Only heartaches for the neighboring residents. Are these the people that we want in our neighbors, as our neighbors, or in our neighborhoods? Do we really want constantly rotating occasional strangers next door to our homes. People who do not live in the houses they are permitted to occupy for short periods of time. Again, from personal experience, this is a phenomena that my wife Flo and I vote no thanks. Over the last 4 years, and as part of the concerned Wainfleet community, we and other residents have filed complaints with bylaw officers, written letters to council, presented at a virtual Zoom meeting, and forwarded written concerns before and after recent public meetings. To date, no concrete decisions have been enacted to curb the operation of STRs in residential neighborhoods, except for stiffer fines for noise and nuisance bylaws. These new noise bylaws enacted at the special meeting of July 7th is vague and ambiguous and quite likely impossible to enforce. It only puts a Band-Aid on a festering wound and does little to cure the disease. We are in high season for short-term rentals, and the absentee, non-resident landlords continue to win for another year at the local residents' expense. The resident property owners will suffer through another summer of beach mayhem, where the enjoyment of one's home for numerous fleeters will continue to be negatively influenced by the carefree and inconsiderate attitudes of numerous STR owners and their renters. We have reviewed all the presentations in the virtual meeting and the letters submitted and received by the township during the survey, and have found that well over 70% complained about the same disturbances, such as loud partying, profanity, loud music, public urination, public intoxication, lewd and rude behavior by the renters. Several operators have even stated that they themselves would not tolerate that type of behavior in their properties. However, they were the permanent residents of that property while their house was being rented. This is not the norm with many STR properties. During that virtual meeting, the former mayor also stated, and I quote, "More than anything, we need to respect the people who live here, the residents who live here, and live next door to these party houses, or very close. I think every councillor would probably say, we would not want to live next door to one of these. And so it's not right for anyone else to have to live next door to one of these big party houses. It's very important that we keep Wainfleet. We keep it quiet and residential or country, depending on where you are. And that's everybody's right and respected." These words by the former mayor, Kevin Gibson, are wise words to heed. Let's not forget all those who really make up the true fiber of the community. The staff report presented to council on May 10th of last year addressed licensing and penalties for short-term rentals. However, there was nothing in the report that regulates where they can operate. There were no real enforceable penalties or bylaws to curb the operation of short-term rentals in residential areas. Only regulations that they operate safely, such as having working smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, boil water signage, septic system, and electrical inspections be in place. Obviously, we believe these regulations are essential in the operation of any business venture. However, where are the considerations that protect the adjacent homeowners' property values, their peaceful way of life? To enlist present homeowners as neighborhood police to be a favorable solution for any Wainfleet resident and right in their own backyard. I wouldn't look forward to spending my time at home on that sort of activity. There are much more worthwhile things I'd like to do. What can this direction lead to peace of mind in one's own home. For 4 years, we have been addressing this phenomena from the viewpoint of the STR operator, trying to accommodate STRs and control them. How can we accommodate STRs and control them? Thus the licensing and infraction bylaws. However, this has never been significantly addressed from the neighboring homeowner's point of view. The homeowner's point of view has been secondary to the desires of the STR owners. This same homeowner who purchased a home to live in a residential area now finds himself living next door to a hotel. How do we accommodate them? How do we allow them to enjoy their properties without having to put up with the mayhem I stated earlier and having to be the bylaw police? How do we have them feel safe in their home when every 2 or 3 days there's new strangers walking on our beach and our neighborhoods? Do we just tell them, well, it's a sign of the times, so just grin and bear it? I think not.
Sir, excuse me. I apologize for the interruption. I just need to give you a 2-minute warning. You just seem to be reading directly from your word for word from your letter. So council does have this and has reviewed it. If you would like to focus on your last 2 minutes on key points, just so you don't run out of time, that'd be fine.
There's only one way to control the daily disturbances created by the partiers, is to demand that the property that is being rented be the owner's primary residence. This is the bylaw that many other communities have enacted, and in the interest and well-being of their present and future residents have had to implement, ultimately giving STR neighbors peace of mind and enjoyment in their homes. This bylaw would keep the house a residence and a residence, yes, a residence where people live and not stay, and thus conforms with the residential neighborhood. One regulation I would like to add, or to see added to these bylaws, is a minimum 7-day rental. This would do wonders in limiting the rowdy parties, because the partiers will never spend $7,000 to $10,000 to rent a house for a week. This will accomplish 2 things. It will stop the 2-day rentals and will bring the rental price of the house back down to earth once the owners realize they can't rent their house for $1,000 or $1,500 a night. It will bring the weekly rental price down to $2,000 to $3,000, and this allows for the family vacation at the lake and curtails the 2-day rentals. These are the people we want visiting our community. They are the ones who will shop here, eat here, and frequent what the community has to offer because they are here for 1 or 2 weeks. As leaders of the community, you have a difficult and very important decision to make, one that will impact our community for years to come. You need to decide whether the town of Wainfleet is a resident-friendly community, a community whose residents know and look after their neighbors, are active in the community and community functions, and support locally owned businesses, attend local churches, contribute to food drives, and send their children to thriving local schools. A community that is, or a community that is dark during the winter months and party central in the summer months. all orchestrated by absentee landlords who collect rents in this community and spend them in the community in which they live and contribute nothing to the town of Wainfleet. Which community do you want to live in? Mr. Mayor, councilors, it's time to enact proper bylaws to protect the well-being and peace of mind of the residents that are the very fabric of Wainfleet. And that is the people that live here, that send their children to schools here, shop here, and support local charities. They actually contribute daily to the health and wealth of Wainfleet. Let's not continue to penalize the positive forces within our community. Please act before it's too late, and Wainfleet will no longer fit the definition put out by the township in 2017-18 vision statement. It clearly states the Township of Wainfleet will be a sustainable rural community that offers outstanding quality of life for all.
Thank you, Mr. Leon. Your time is now up. I apologize.
Thanks for the opportunity to let me speak.
You're very welcome. Are there any questions from council? Councilman McClellan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Leon, I've been to your house. I've spoken to you about this problem. We have worked on this. This is not a phenomenon that just happened in Wainfleet. This has happened around the world in the last 5 years, 7 years. Every municipality is struggling with it. We try and figure something out. Legal, the town staff tells us you can't do that. That's not, you got to do this, you can't. So we try and put something hard in. Every one of us sitting at this table tonight want to make this right. But I don't want to do it 5 times. We've got to get it right once. We've got a good one coming tonight. Is it perfect? No. I know there's 4 or 5 things that are going to be added to it tonight or suggested that they get added to so that we can make it better. But it doesn't matter how big a city you are, how much money you have. None of them have gotten it right. So we're trying. Believe me, I've probably read 50 bylaws that from all over North America, not just Canada, other cities and states, to try and see what they're doing. Everyone here has done the same thing, and we try and brainstorm. But we have different human rights here. We have, and unfortunately, I asked that woman tonight, how is it you can take a residential place and turn it into a commercial operation? They don't look at it that way. Impact planning doesn't look at it that way. A town has taken it to court and lost that battle. So I'm not saying our hands are tied, but we've got to be smart and we got to try and get it right. So believe me, there's nothing I'd like to do better than say, hey, no Airbnbs in this town and it's gone. But we'd probably waste a whole lot of taxpayers' money fighting a lawsuit because there's millions of dollars have been invested by people that think they can just come in and they can break the rules because the province doesn't stand behind us. So we all feel your pain. We're all trying to get this done. We spent an hour now. We've probably spent 100 hours on this over the last 4 years trying to get it right. So we are working towards it. Will we get it right? Will we make it right for everybody? Probably not. But all we can do is keep trying to make it better. So it's not that we haven't heard you. And like I say, every one of my councilors here and mayor and staff have all been working on this. But it's not easy. You think you found one that's great, and then you find out it got beat and somebody took it to court and it got turned down around. So it's not as easy as it sounds. I think when I was at your house, I said, help me write one so that we can make it right. It's not easy. That's all I can tell you. We're working hard to get it, but it's not easy.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, John, for bringing up the question. That's true. I think a key point in this is making that home the principal residence, okay? Many other communities have done it, and I've stated in my letter here the communities that I've seen that have done it, and there's more, okay? That curbs the two-day partiers, okay? Like that's where, and we've had families come next door to us, okay, where they come with the family and their kids, and not a problem, okay? It's when you get the 10, 12, 15, and then we have 3 in a row where you get the same thing. So now you got like and there's tents on the beach, and it's mayhem, okay? So that's one of the things that I think would cure it. Another thing is a minimum 7-day rental, okay? Which it curbs the partiers, okay? Those are 2 items that I think have to be in this bylaw that I think would probably be accepted by everyone, or should be accepted by everyone. The people that want to rent their cottage for a week or 2 weeks while they're away or whatever, and earn a couple of extra bucks. It's people are spending $2 million to collect rents in 2-3 months, in 3 months, okay? And how do you, yeah.
We all know this. We're banging our heads trying to figure out how to get it right.
Any other comments, questions, discussion from council? Nope. Okay, thank you, Mr. Leon.
Thank you.
Any other further discussion, just as council? No. Okay, I have a motion that the presentation from Rico Leon respecting the short-term rental bylaw be received for information. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor McClellan, Councilor Van Fleet. Any other further discussion? Seeing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Okay, we are moving on to administrative staff reports. Ms. Louie, would you please like to give me a brief overview of your report?
Yep, thank you. So through the mayor to all of council, so administrative staff report 5 is in relation to the cancellation or reduction of property taxes. So this report contains 2 Section 357 applications requesting a partial reduction to the 2022 taxes for reasons of fire and demolition. So staff are recommending council approve the application and authorize staff to write off taxes in the amount of $889.87. Of that, $423.71 is the municipal or the township portion. Thank you.
Any discussion from council? Seeing none, okay, I have a motion that the administrative staff report ASR 005/2023 respecting cancellation, reduction, and refund of property tax be received, and that council approve the attached applications pursuant to Section 357 of the Municipal Act 2001 to write off taxes of $889.87. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor McClellan, Councilor Gilmore. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, moving on to community and development staff reports. Ms. Earl, would you please provide a brief overview of your memo?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This memo outlines changes to the revised draft short-term rental licensing bylaw as directed by council during the February 21st meeting. In order to finalize the township's approach to short-term rentals in a timely manner, staff would be respectfully requesting that council's consideration of the revised bylaw and look for your direction at this time.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councilor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I've got a couple of points that I think we should be looking at adding to this. So the first one, Mr. Leon, I told you we've been working on. Number 1 is 7-day minimal rental. So you can look at that. Number 2 is no guest day or night. Number 3 is 6 people max in a building, and that's with 3 bedrooms, 4 and 2 bedrooms, 2 and a 1 bedroom. I'm going to add one here that I know you don't like, but I'm going to say we put a maximum number, or we start a lottery, and you only allow so many per year, but I don't think that'll go through, so we'll leave it at that.
Any other discussion from council? Councilor Gilmore, go ahead.
Oh, well, thank you, Mayor. So just procedurally, we're going to just go through those one at a time, and that would be my first question. And then I think it would be enlightening to get some comments about the concept that Mr. Leone brought up about owner present and pros and cons. So I'd like to hear, for everyone's benefit, the pros and cons and the possibility of that. So it's not really, those are more comments, but we have to go through the first in some sort of organized fashion. But maybe we'll start with the owner-present idea and work backwards. How about that?
Ms. Earl, can you speak to that then?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. The owner-present idea was explored early on in the process. That was one of the main reasons why the B&Bs, or the traditional bed and breakfasts, were exempt from the draft licensing bylaw, mainly because with owner-present, we do see a reduced need for the nuisance complaints. So we're not going to get the partying, and I agree with Mr. Leone's comments about the owner-present is going to reduce a lot of those complaints. I think that the comment about the 2-day turnaround and those type of partying houses, and that council looking for the direction for the 7-day minimum rental time, is going to help alleviate that from the owner occupied. So because B&Bs are exempt from this bylaw, it's still going to be difficult to enforce based on the fact that some property owners may still wish to rent out their properties for months at a time, seasons at a time, whether they're, snowbirds or whatnot, traveling. That might just be a bit more difficult from an enforcement side of things. So changing other aspects of the licensing bylaw might get the same benefit.
Any other comments or questions on that? Oh. Councilor McCullen, you can go ahead if you want.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, in accordance with Councillor Gilmore's proposal, perhaps running through the 4 points that Councillor McClellan raised in sequence, and perhaps getting council's input either in support of or in opposition to those points, and then that will be direction that staff can take away to look at making the necessary amendments to the bylaw. If those are the 4 points at this stage, the first one mentioned was a proposed amendment to the draft bylaw that would see a minimum 7-day rental. And perhaps if that could show up as some sort of motion moved by, I guess, Councillor McClellan, who put it forward, if there was a seconder, and then you can have that discussion, ask any questions on that, and then move on to the next one, just from a procedural perspective to keep the ball rolling.
Councilor Councilman McClellan, you can go ahead first.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to ask.
Your mic.
To you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to ask when it was about owner residency. So we got turned it before I could ask it. Mrs. Earl, is there any way that we can require that somebody own a building 2 years before they can rent it? So they have to, you buy it, you have to live there or use it yourself for 2 years. Now they get to know the neighbors that are there. So there might be a sense of community before you rent it out for a 7-day rental. Is that something that's possible? I don't know if it's legal. This is where we get hung up all the time, but I'm just asking the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the inquiry, Councillor. I don't have the exact answer right now, but that's definitely something that staff can look into and report back. And it may be up for discussion what that time frame is going to look like and how an applicant would provide that proof as part of the application for the license. So that's definitely something we can report back to council on.
So we'll make that one number 5.
Councilor Wainfleet, would you like to speak?
I was going to second Councillor McCullen's motion because it was my original motion, but hey, it's yours.
So that's moved by Councillor McClelland, seconded by Councillor Van Vliet, that the staff be directed to investigate the 7-day minimum rental.
So we have our mover and our seconder. Do we have any discussion on that? Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? So that one's carried. Move on to number 2.
Number 2 per Councillor McClellan was the no guests above and beyond those established per bedroom, the maximum limit. Again, moved by Councillor McClellan. Is there a seconder?
Do we have any discussion on that? Councillor Van Vliet, go ahead.
I'm not opposed to this. I'm just, in a roundabout way, kind of going to say that we can say you're not allowed to have guests, but we don't have the enforcement to enforce it. So we're just going on people's good faith. So Lindsay, how would we enforce something like that? Okay, I see your face. We just don't have the manpower. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, most bylaw enforcement is complaint-driven in the municipality, so it would have to come in as a complaint that short-term rental, a known short-term rental, if it's on the registry list, has more than 6 people outside or whatnot. Then if bylaw gets a call, they'd have to go and investigate and ask to see, any type of agreement that they have for the rental agreement, but also in the number of people. It's pretty evident, so that they'd have to witness as evidence that there's additional guests. And then we would have to apply the penalty as noted in the bylaw, which we will have to come up with one.
Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor. I think, Lindsay, we'll have to look at Schedule B, 4.12, which is a permitting non-occupying guests, and there is a financial penalty to that. So, A, that's null and void because we're not allowing guests. However, we need to figure out what sort of financial penalty we will apply if we do have to deal with guests. So I don't know whether if we want to look at each one of these recommendations and see if there's an appropriate financial penalty, adjust that now or adjust it later, but we are going to have to look at Schedule B. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council, and thank you, Councillor Anderson, for noting that. And if this motion passes, then staff will be going back to do the research, do the investigations, and will report back to council with options and alternatives regarding the implementation, which will look at things like the penalties contained in the draft bylaw and so on and so forth. So that will all form part of the direction that goes to staff, and we will come back to you with a recommendation and information and options if necessary.
Any other discussion on the second motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Moving on to number 3.
Number 3 referenced the 6 people max per building, maximum of 3 bedrooms, etc. Again, moved by Councillor McClellan, a seconder for that to direct staff to investigate.
So any discussion on that? Councillor McClellan, go ahead.
You, Mr. Mayor, we'll just make it clear. If a house has 5 bedrooms, 6 bedrooms, 8 bedrooms, there's only 3 of them getting rented. You got to lock the doors on the others. It's not an option. So there's no coming in and asking, I have a big house, I want more. No, it's 6 people, that's it.
Okay, I understand that. I will remain still opposed about the 3 bedrooms just for the sake of those long-standing good rental properties. That's just my comment on that. If there's no other discussion, Councilor McClellan, go ahead.
So unfortunately here, we're trying to legislate common sense, right? It's 5% of the population that's causing the problem, and 95% of them are good. But I don't know how you legislate this. somebody else smarter than me is gonna have to figure it out, because I don't know how they were brought up, but I wasn't brought up that way, so.
So no further discussion on that? Okay, so all in favor? Opposed? And carried. Moving on, number 4.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. Number 4 was the establishment of either a maximum number of licenses in the municipality and/or the establishment of a lottery in order to award licenses that may be capped. Again, moved by Councillor McClellan. I don't know if there's a seconder.
Do we have a seconder on that motion? Seeing none. So that's defeated.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and then the last point that was added was establishing a pre-existing residency prior to the cottage or the dwelling unit being permitted to be used as a short-term rental. So a pre-existing residency prior to short-term rental use. Again, moved by Councillor McClellan. I think you mentioned 2 years, but staff will look at that. Moved by Councillor McClellan. Is there a seconder?
Any discussion on that? Councillor Gilmore, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, are we going to pick a point in time where that has to start, or like, I mean, the ones that are going on now, are they going to have to stop and live there for 2 years and start again? Like, I'm not disagreeing with you. I don't know how you enforce it backwards. Maybe there's a way. There's lots of smarter people than me in here too.
Quite frankly, I don't know if you do that or not. But anybody that buys a place today and thinks they're gonna start renting it tomorrow will have to live there for 2 years. I don't know, that's up to staff here and legal to tell us if you can go backwards. I don't know that you can or you can't, but at least we'll stop it. Maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 5 years. I don't know what the correct number is, but whatever it comes out, at least it stops it. And hopefully, if you have to live there 2 years or whatever number of years, you get to know some of your neighbors get to know you. If you've got somebody that's renting the place and going crazy, they know you and they can call you directly and say, hey, you got someone bad in here, you got to get them out. Then it doesn't become a bylaw issue, it's a neighbor issue, which is how it's always been here. You know, it's been rented here for 100 years, and there was a bad person come in, they knew who owned it, they picked it up. Hey, Joe, you got a dummy in here, come and get him, right? I mean, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get it back to common courtesy and common decency. We've lost that.
So, any other questions or comments? We leave it to staff to kind of dictate what we're going to go with. Okay, so I'll call the question then. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and just to clarify, it won't be staff dictating, but it'll staff researching, providing options, and then council will be able to make an informed decision once they have all the information. So those were the 5 that Councillor McClellan raised. I'm not sure if any other members have any other points they'd like to add. If not.
Any other? Yeah, Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor. Lindsay, I'm just wondering, I keep bringing up Schedule B. I personally, as a counselor, like to have some input into the degree of penalty that we're going to put on, failure to comply with the notice, et cetera. I'm just personally, when you're looking at that, and I don't know how that feedback is going to come back to us as council for approval, but for me, some of these suggested fees are half of what they should be, and then there are a couple of them that are 3 or 4 times percentage light. in my opinion, because the ones that I think that are a bit light are mostly related to behavioral issues. And so if you pay $5,000 3 or 4 times, you're possibly going to vet your clients a little closer or stop being a rental short-term person. So I think our penalties are light. I'm glad that we have some, but I don't believe that they're punitive enough. The people that don't cause problems won't be paying any penalties. Thank you.
Ms. Earl, you want to speak to that?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, staff have taken direction from council at the last meeting that we discussed short-term rentals and increased the penalties quite significantly based on another municipality's penalty structure. And the main changes were the operating and advertising the short-term rental without a license. So those were the incremental penalties. You said fees, but we're referring to penalties as fines, just to clarify. And those were the $10,000 for first offense, $15,000, and $20,000 for subsequent offenses. You're referring to some of the other fines that are, you're saying, too low. And so if there is something that council wanted direction to change, staff would take that into consideration, but also caution that the penalties cannot be punitive in nature. However, we don't really have what that set limit would be as what's determined punitive.
Councilor Anderson.
So, Lindsay, if with legal advice, if you could sort of look at other sort of preset areas where they do penalty. I know, for example, in the 4.3456 section, those are averaging around $1,000. And I'm not sure that in other jurisdictions that some of those penalties are a lot more money, and they are quantitatively ramped up on first, second, and third offense. So we could start with a number and we could just multiply that out if they keep being a chronic person with the same chronic offense, where they probably end up having enough demerit points that they get a revoked license in the first place. But I'll still reiterate, I think that those penalty numbers are not strong enough. Thank you.
Councilor Anderson, would you like to make a motion to explore that?
Sure, I would like to make a motion to ask the staff to look at appropriate increments of penalty fees.
Can I get a seconder? Councilor McClellan? Any other discussion on it? Councilor McClellan, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree with Councilor Anderson. I'm guessing we're going to ask the question, is that something that council can look at them and make our suggestions for where we think they should be, and then again let staff decide if we're right or wrong? But I mean, I look at some of the fines for speeding tickets, and if that's not punitive, I don't know what is. So, you know, it's a little one is nothing. A big one, you pay a lot of money. A real big one, you lose your car, whatever you're driving, right? So I don't know what you're calling punitive, but if they're disturbing somebody's peaceful way of life, I think we should hit them as hard as we can. And we should be at the top of the list, not the middle of the pack.
Fair enough. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, John, for that support. Just to make myself clear, I think if you're renting for $1,000 a night, I don't know how many are or aren't, but if you're renting for $1,000 a night and we charge you $1,000 penalty, that's one night out of a possible 180 nights that you're renting. It would mean absolutely nothing. That's 1/180th of your income. So for me, that's not punitive. And I think that if you were to have that sort of discussion, possibly legally, I don't think a judge would think 180th of a percent is punitive. Thank you.
Any other discussion on it? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Is there any other discussions on the report? Councilor Gilmore, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's important for the benefit of the gallery, and I'm sure lots of people that are watching, that we understand that we're still in this process and probably not going to get this matter fixed for this calendar year. If that's not correct, then someone can correct me. Regrettably, the culture of entitlement crept up on us, and getting it out is also going to be a rather painful and onerous process. But hopefully that we're at least on the right track. And the other thing that Mr. Leone referenced in his presentation was the concept of how the bylaws have to be reported and enforced. And again, like, I don't support letting any bylaw officer just go out and be the drive around and pick things out police. So the only alternative to that are people making anonymous complaints. Well, and that's subjective because most people are smart enough to know who the anonymous person is. However, with the lack of any better system, it's just going to have to be that way, and hopefully it doesn't take too many calls and enforcement to clean this up. But the whole thing is a mess. But it's driven, and Councilor McClellan alluded to it as well, it's driven by the culture that we're unfortunately find ourselves in, that's, again, crept into our society, and is going to be a big problem to creep it out, and I don't really see a solution to that. But yeah, the concepts of mutual respect and things like that have unfortunately left us. But I just want to be clear that probably anything that we do now or in the next month or to enact this isn't going to have a great effect on what's going to happen in 2023. Is that, Lindsay, is that a correct statement, or do you have any insight?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that inquiry, Councillor. It's still going to take some time, even if we bring the changed bylaw back to the next available council meeting. It could be the end of this month, for example, and we do finalize a bylaw. We won't have a program in place until we have somebody to administer and enforce such bylaw. So that could take a month or two just to find a person to get that body in place to start the process, and recognizing that the majority of the renters right now have already identified that a lot of their season or for the summer season have been booked. And I think that there's merit in recognizing that right now. So staff will take that into consideration and provide council with some information as to what that kind of pilot program and start date would look like.
Thank you. And one more thing, Mayor. I just want to sort of publicly apologize to the 90-some-odd% of all the good people that are going to get caught in the crossfire for the actions that we have to take to deal with a small percentage of bad people. So that causes me great pain too, to have to do that. However, again, just another fact of life and the culture that we currently live in.
Any other comments, questions? Yeah. Okay, then seeing none, then I have a motion that the memorandum from the manager of the Community and Development Services respecting revised short-term rental license bylaw be received, and that staff be directed to report back at the next available meeting with information with the information requested. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor McClellan, Councilor Van Fleet. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Mayor, I move we take a recess.
Take a 5-minute recess? All right, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. I know. All right, we're going to move on to the drainage staff reports. Mr. Jemison, would you please provide a brief overview of your report?
Great, yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council. So Drainage Staff Report 2 of the year is providing an update for the information on the consolidated South Wainfleet Drain Section 76 project. So this was initiated in 2017 through council resolution appointing GM Blue Plan to update the assessment schedules for the consolidated drain system. As the name kind of implies, it was under one assessment schedule, consolidated. So work being done on, say, Burkett Road would be billed to people living on Morog Road. So the new report will break all of that out into 48 branch drains, and this complies with the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs policies. So that was the main reason that we undertook this report. There's been several public meetings throughout this process, and the final public information meeting is going to be held on April 20th at the Community Hall. So following that, we will proceed with the Drainage Act, which still has 2 future mailings going out to property owners to invite them to the meeting to consider, and then through the appeals process. So this has been an undertaking for quite some time, and it will be very nice to get this through. So we're in the final stretch, and I would be happy to take any questions about this report.
Any questions or comments? No. Okay, then I have a motion that the Drainage Staff Report DSR 002-2023 respecting the consolidated South Wainfleet Drain Section 76 project update be received. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor McClellan, Councilor Anderson, any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Moving on to the 2023 and 2024 drainage program update. Mr. Jameson, would you please provide a brief overview of your report?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the annual report that we provide an update on the maintenance and improvement projects going on throughout the municipality. So we had a fairly successful year last year. Did about 15.5 kilometers of drain maintenance and several other projects. I'd like to commend our drainage excavator, Brandon, the operator, Brandon, who has been with the township now for 2 years, and we're very fortunate to have him. So next week, we're going to be having the annual drainage program open house, where we present the information that is essentially in this report, and the Conservation Authority will also be on site to provide a presentation on the floodplain mapping project. So maintenance is discussed in this report, and we're looking at doing some more maintenance on the consolidated South Wainfleet drain system, as well as reconstruction on 2 municipal drains, the Biederman and the Ellsworth. I'd like to highlight just 2 other major projects that are ongoing in the municipality. So first, we have the CSW drain number 13 culvert replacement, which is just east of town, which is a very large culvert going under the feeder canal, as well as Clarendon Road and Feeder Road. So engineering work is almost wrapped up on that, with some borehole work and soils investigations scheduled. So that will be coming up on the council radar later this year. And then the other large item that has kind of started to get some momentum with the Drainage Advisory Committee, we've begun discussions on maintenance and improvement opportunities for the Big Forks drain, which is our main outlet for the whole municipality. So this kind of culminated with hiring a drone contractor who did LiDAR data and flew the drain last week and on the weekend on behalf of the municipality. So I would just like to say and invite everyone to the open house, and if I can't make it to that, the website is regularly updated with drain maintenance and the engineering updates. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions or comments? Councilor Gilmore, go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. Can you just advise the rest of us the potential timeline for dealing with the big culvert here next to the feeder?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, sure. So the engineering work has just about wrapped up. The engineer has provided a preliminary design. So the next step is to do some borehole investigations to make sure that the foundation would be suitable for that design. Once that is confirmed, we would be bringing it back to start budgeting and discussing when that type of project would occur.
So as far, I should have asked one more. Construction. The other stuff I already knew, but what's your anticipated construction date for that project?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would love for it to be next year, but that's discussions that will have to come with the the operations manager and the treasurer for scheduling when that construction will take place.
Through your worship, if I may, to Councillor Gilmore, preliminary discussions with the engineers. This is going to be a very significant project, and we're looking at well over 6 figures, and maybe into 7 figures because of the size of this. Once the engineering is completed, excuse me, and the soil investigation indicates that the design foundation of the soil conditions is perfect for the design, we will be coming back and we'll be looking for proposals, I guess, in future, just to give council a heads up. But the preliminary discussions are that it's going to be a very expensive project, and permitting alone and everything else, we'll be starting some of those discussions ahead of time with the different agencies to see what we're looking at as far as the approval process, because we will be into the feeder canal, the old feeder. But it's going to be a very extensive project, and we're proposing maybe next year to start bringing it forward to capital. But as soon as we're done with the final investigations of the soil and the design work, then we can actually put the proper numbers together for construction, and we'll bring that forward to council.
Go ahead, Councilor Gilmore.
Okay, well, I just want to, and I think, Mark, you understand, like, this is a significant bottleneck to things south of the, like, it's been an ongoing problem. Fields are being flooded, and so I want everybody to be aware. I mean, you did a good job of highlighting it's going to be very expensive, but it also can't be like the Gents Road Bridge project that I was personally a part of kicking a can for 12 years. Like, this is not Gents Road. That's all, as long as we all understand. We have to figure out how we're going to get this done and not kick this can down the road because it's a lot of money, but there's a lot of money that gets left in fields, or could be left in fields, and doing nothing is not an option.
Go ahead.
You forgot my mic. I speak loud enough, you don't need my mic. Has anybody looked at it as a pumped project? So you pump from one side over to the other, so we put, maybe 4 12-inch pumps in. I don't know what the number is that you need, but is that an option when you're talking $1.5 million, $2 million? That'll last 50 years. I don't know what the life expectancy of 4 12-inch pumps or the nature somewhere in that area, if that would work. Yeah, you got to turn the power on. I know we need the hydro, right? But we should just look at different options, right?
Through your worship, yes, we'll inquire with the engineering firm, but keep in mind also that Mark and I have been in discussions and reviewing possible grant applications for such a large project, because again, this is solely a town one. It's not something that can be built to the drainage system, so it'll be solely on our expense. So it's definitely a capital project that we will be looking forward for some additional funding as well.
Look at options.
Any other discussion, comments? Seeing none? Okay, then I have a motion that drainage staff report DSR 003/2023 respecting the township's 2022-2023 drainage program update be received, and that the 2023 municipal drain maintenance program be approved. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor McCullen, Councilor Van Fleet. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Okay, moving on to the public work staff reports. Mr. Nan, would you please provide a brief overview of your report?
Thank you, Your Worship, and to members of council. This staff report is number 8 of this year, and it's for the award for our evaporator condenser, condenser tank, and condenser pump. As council recalls, this was presented during our capital budget overview and our capital budget. Since that was approval, we did seek out the various agencies that are capable of performing the work. We did have some special invites included. And once we placed the tender online, unfortunately, again, we only received a single bidder, but it does fall under the allotted amount for the budget, and our recommendations are included in the report.
Any discussion or comments? No? Okay, then I have a motion that the Public Works Staff Report PWSR 008/2023 respecting the award of tender for one new evaporative condenser, polycondenser tank, and a condenser pump be received for information, and that council direct the manager of operations to engage the services of Black & McDonald Limited to replace the evaporative condenser, polycondenser tank, and the condenser pump at the Wainfleet Arena. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor McCullen, Councilor Wainfleet. Any other further discussions? Seeing none, then I'll just call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Okay, moving on to the arena septic tanks. Mr. Nan, would you please provide a brief overview of your memo?
Through your worship and members of council, it's unfortunate that I've had to bring this forward. It was a result of our regular maintenance that we normally do. It started with receiving a complaint of odor behind the town hall. And then as part of our 2017 compliance approval process, we've had to implement a pumping out system or a maintenance program for all our septic tanks. So we performed those investigations once we received the odor complaint. And part of the investigation, we found that we've had some infiltration, extraneous flow going into our septic tanks. Staff further consulted, and we got a cameraing consultant in so we can actually get a camera inside and have a good look around once we've pumped them out. And unfortunately, beknownst to anybody, including all our permits in the past, we found an additional tank. This tank is actually bringing in groundwater, so we're actually pumping groundwater into our septic bed. We've since met with the MOECP as of yesterday. Obviously, we're going to have to do an amendment to our environmental compliance approval, as well as look at changing the tanks, because right now there was originally 3 tanks, and now we found a 4th. So in part of the discussion with infiltration is now we're going to be looking at changing the tanks. The new modern tanks are a single tank, so we won't be, we're not talking about putting 4 tanks back in. Again, we have to make an amendment to our compliance approval process, which requires us to get the engineering firm back in to make sure that the quantities and the capabilities are going to be there for future. And at the same time, we're going to be looking at hopefully getting some ideas of what the region proposal is for the EMS building, because I don't want to go through the approval process twice. And hopefully we can look at those numbers and then try and do everything all at once. And then once we have those numbers, then I'll be coming back with a report to council just to give you a heads up on what it's going to cost us to repair the system or to upgrade it to where we should be.
Any questions, comments, discussion? Councilor Wainfleet, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Richard. This is unfortunate that we found this. I do find it, though, kind of odd, because anybody who's lived here and who's been out in those fields, I mean, back in the 90s, the late 80s, we weren't allowed to have baseball games out there during tournaments because of this reason. So I just find it a little odd that it hadn't been found, during the 2017 when we replaced the system. Like, we were all told, we don't play out there, you don't park out there, you don't do anything out there. So I just find it a little odd that it wasn't discovered. And we knew the smell has been there for a good 30 years.
Through your worship, the smell in the arena or behind the arena? No, behind the arena. Okay. Yeah, when the inspection was done in 2017, the tanks were in fairly good shape. They met the compliance, and they actually matched everything that was designed in the permits back from 1976. That's how old these tanks are. Nobody had a clue that the fourth tank was there. In fact, talking to some staff that have long since retired, they weren't even aware that extra tank was there. This had no riser on it. It was buried. It was sealed. It just showed up. When we did the compliance investigation, they investigated the tanks, but we didn't camera every sewer line in Wainfleet or in our complex. We checked the tanks, the conditions, we pumped them out, we saw all that, but we didn't camera every pump line or every line they went through. And that's how we found it this time, because we realized that there was more water going into the pump chamber than was actually going into the lead pipe. We thought maybe the line was broken, so that's why I wanted to camera it. We found a tank when we cambered it instead of a solid line going from one to the other.
Councilman McClellan, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So, Richard, is this tank that you found part of a working system, or is it a dead tank that's sitting there and there's no current effluent going in it, and it's just the old bed is picking up groundwater?
The unfortunate, through your worship to Councilor McClellan, the unfortunate part is it's in line with the entire system. It's not like it was just a tank in the ground. It's actually in line with the other tanks. If you look at I think I sent you a picture. If you look at the photograph, here's the existing two tanks that we knew of. If you look further down, there's a little dark spot by the hydro pole. That's our pump chamber. So all these lines basically went into that pump chamber. Well, in the middle of it, all of a sudden we find another tank, and it is actually flowing through that tank. But we're also getting groundwater through this tank, which is causing additional pumping.
Wonderful.
Councilor Anderson.
Through Mayor. Richard, I noticed you mentioned the region and the EMS going forward, and there may be accommodating extra flow, et cetera. Are we also looking preemptively at yet unknown uses of the empty fire station, if that would cause extra sort of uptake in our system?
Through your worship to Councilor Anderson, the way the calculations work are based, some aspects are based on fixtures and some are based on occupancy and the numbers of people that are utilizing those facilities. Right now, I mean, I believe, I could probably find it, but I believe the community hall, for instance, is rated for like 140 occupants, which we don't have on a regular basis. When we did do the original tank in 2017, it was designed with it's called a balancing tank. That's what we have behind the concession stand now. We do have extra capacity in that balancing tank. So in speaking with the engineers from the existing report, we're hoping that we may not have to alter anything, except maybe a different type of pump. Instead of just a effluent pump, we may have to get actually, a solid pump to break it up a little bit more. But as far as adding capacity, as far as saying, well, listen, we need to add enough for another 100 people, they don't design a system to do that. So we did have a buffer in there to begin with, and we're hoping that any additions that EMS may want to do may be captured in that balancing quantities anyways. But until we know exactly what they want, it's hard for an engineer to say this is what we need. So I'm trying to, obviously, I have to go through a compliance approval anyways with the MOE regarding these tanks. I just don't want to do it a second time when we do alter the permit again. So I'm just trying to figure out, and I may just put some scenarios together and say, listen, this is the max they can ever put in that building anyways. So we might use those numbers and see if we can fit it in what we have. But again, that'll be a discussion we'll have with the engineering firm.
McClellan, go ahead.
So currently, this tank just flows through. There's no third pipe in. There's an in and an out, and that's it, or?
Through your worship, yes, it's an inline tank that's basically flowing straight in and out. And I said how about I just cut the pipe, take the tank out, and put the pipe back together again? And he says, well, you're still not in compliance with what your permit already has. So,
So it's a change in permit, but the fix may be relatively cheap.
yeah, we're hoping that, in speaking with the engineers, we're hoping that we can just do an amendment to the existing permits and the approval process, which will keep the cost down from the engineering perspective. But again, we're going to try to see if the numbers, that future numbers that could be coming at us, can fit into the same system while we're doing it. But we're anticipating, obviously, changing the tanks that are there, and we may end up getting rid of 4 and putting a single one in.
Don't look too far in the future.
But again, I've been accused of
It'll be
tripping over
somebody else's
rocks.
problem.
Yeah, I've been accused of tripping over rocks and to pick up my feet to stop finding these rocks to kick. So, but you know, unfortunately, we did find it, so now we have to go through the process.
Councilor Van Vliet.
Through
Go
you,
ahead.
Mr. Mayor. Richard, just, have we checked the smell that comes from the canteen out by the Ball Diamond? Since we're on smells and septic.
To your worship, we did find a broken pipe out there, and we did fix that. Keep in mind as well, that plumbing is going to be upgraded when we change those 2 washrooms over to handicap accessibility as part of the sports complex project. So we will be looking into that as well. The balancing tank is a sealed tank, but again, you know, there's always going to be, if there's a little gap or a little hole, it's going to come out somewhere.
Any other comments or discussion? Okay, seeing none, I have a motion then that the memorandum from the manager of operations respecting the arena septic tanks be received for information. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor Van Vliet, Councilor Anderson will go with. Any other further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. All right, we're moving on to the review of correspondence. The proclamation request for Canadian Viral Hepatitis Day, May 11th, 2023. Is there any discussion respecting the correspondence requesting a proclamation for Canadian Viral Hepatitis Day? Any discussion? Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor McClellan, Councilor Gilmore. Any further discussion? Seeing none, so all in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. Bylaws, we have no bylaws on the agenda this evening. Notices of motion, are there any notices of motion? Councilor McClellan.
I have one notice of motion that staff be directed to investigate and report back to council regarding the potential infill of the north end of the feeder canal. I would suggest maybe it be Marcus because it's part of drainage and some of that works through there, but it'll probably be Mark and Richard and whoever else is involved in it. But I've had a brief conversation with Mark about it when I talk about the fill. So let's see if we can do it, and then we'll go on further from there on anything. So we'll leave it at that right now. Okay. North of Forks. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Oh, I need a seconder on it? Yeah, Councilor Gilmore. Okay, any discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, so then I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed and carried. Okay, moving to closed meeting. We don't have any further items for consideration in the closed session this evening, so we'll move on to bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council. So I have a motion that the bylaw number 015-2023 being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the actions of the council at its meeting held on the 4th day of April 2023 be read and passed this 4th day of April 2023. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor McClellan? Councilor Anderson? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. There being no further business, the meeting is now adjourned.